The next item of business is portfolio questions on justice and law officers. Question 1, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it plans to create any new offences to enforce restrictions on travel distances for the purpose of exercising leisure and group size for the purpose of meeting other households.
Cabinet Secretary.
The overwhelming majority of people are acting in line with the rules. I'd like to take this opportunity to certainly record my thanks. You are playing a vital role in reducing the spread of the virus and helping to save lives. I cannot stress enough how important it is that people follow the rules. The R number remains precariously close to 1 and at a very critical stage. Stay within your local area for exercise and recreation. Meet with members of no more than 1 other household at a time outdoors, and in small numbers, 8 at most. I'm in regular contact with the Chief Constable about public behaviour and levels of compliance. The Scottish Government does not consider it to be necessary at this time to create new offences to enforce the rules. However, we will continue to monitor the situation and will not hesitate to legislate or indeed move measures from guidance into regulation if necessary.
Colin Smith.
Thank you.
Microphone, Mr. Smith. Your microphone.
I'm just waiting for somebody to unmute me, Presiding Officer. Thank you. Cabinet Secretary, of the problems of people travelling to popular tourism hotspots more than 5 miles away. Now, if there's not going to be any legal measures to stop that, will he at least commit to ensuring that next week's review on lockdown will look at how to mitigate the impact of this on communities? For example, the government's guidance is that car parks will close, and that's led to a lot of residents' lives being made a misery because visitors are parking in streets and residential areas, having a big impact on those residents.
I think you managed to hear that, Cabinet Secretary, did you?
I did indeed, and I thank Colin Smith for the question. He raises a very important point, indeed a very pertinent point, indeed, so I can give an absolute assurance. As we look towards the next review period, we will absolutely consider what Colin Smith says, but let me also give him an absolute assurance that we're not waiting for that next review period. We're already talking, consulting, in discussions with local authority partners, as well as Police Scotland on a regular basis around beauty spots. And what I would say is, for the weekend that passed, although there were still some issues, and Colin Smith is right to raise some of those today, those issues were far fewer than the weekend before, i.e. the first weekend of lockdown. And that was coordinated effort between Police Scotland, local authorities, the national parks, and indeed others. But where we can make improvements, and I certainly think we absolutely can, whether it's in messaging, whether it's in regulation or guidance, then of course we will look to do that.
Question 2, John Mason.
Thank you very much. To ask the Scottish Government how the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Bill could impact on sectarianism in light of this not being specifically mentioned in it as a characteristic that might attract expressions of hatred.
Cabinet Secretary.
There we go. We remain committed to tackling all forms of sectarianism. We continue to invest in community work to address this issue, having now invested an unprecedented £14.5 million in this work since 2012. In line with Lord Bracondale's findings in his independent review of hate crime legislation in Scotland, we consider that sectarian behaviour can be captured using the race and religious aggravations. This is what happens at the moment. Where appropriate, both aggravations can be used together, for example. Our public consultation found that a majority of respondents, almost 60%, did not think that there was a need to address and define sectarianism in hate crime legislation, primarily citing the reason that they believe sectarianism was already adequately covered in existing legislation. Therefore, while the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Bill does not provide for a specific sectarian statutory aggravator or stirring up of hatred offence, it will be possible for its provisions to be applied in respect of sectarian-based offending.
John Mason.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the reply. And with all of what he says, I suppose I just feel that sectarianism is a particularly toxic mix because it brings together religion and race and culture and other issues, which does set it slightly apart from when it is just one issue on its own that's being looked at, like race. And does he not think that, or would he reconsider that sectarianism does need some extra examination?
Cabinet Secretary.
I agree with John Mason's general point. I mean, sectarianism does get a focus from this government, and I've just given a couple of examples of where we're investing heavily in sectarianism or anti-sectarianism specific projects. So it does deserve its own focus. The question here is whether or not a sectarian prejudice aggravator would be the best way to deal with that offending behaviour. And after careful consideration, and I give an assurance to John Mason, it was very careful consideration. It was my view that this would not be the best place, and legislation would not be the best place, or this piece of legislation certainly would not be the best place to deal with that particular offending behaviour. But clearly I'm looking forward to seeing the submissions that come in to the Justice Committee's call for evidence, and I look forward to the parliamentary debate. And as always, when I take forward legislation, I'll continue to keep an open mind.
Can I ask for slightly shorter answers, because I want to get everybody in, Cabinet Secretary? I appreciate this is very important. Donald Cameron, a brief supplementary.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Part 2 of the Hate Crimes Bill has been seen in many quarters as a direct attack on freedom of speech. All of us wish to stamp out hate crime, but with religious groups, the National Secular Society and academics lining up against this bill, will the Cabinet Secretary reconsider the Part 2 provisions?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I've just said in my previous answer, I will obviously listen to the debate, but I don't agree with the premise of Donald Cameron's question. I met with faith groups. I met with the Catholic Church. Recently, I met with the Church of Scotland. I met with SCOJEC, who represent the Jewish community, the Muslim Council of Scotland, the Ahlul Bayt Society, and many others that were represented. And I would not characterise them as having opposition to the bill, including Part 2. They did raise some concerns, but absolutely understood that this was not an attack on freedom of speech, because what we're talking about in Part 2 of the bill is a very high threshold indeed. Behaviour would have to be not only abusive and threatening, but also likely or have the intention of stirring up hatred. So I look forward to the debate. I will, of course, listen to the many groups that Donald Cameron references, and I continue to keep my dialogue open with members of the opposition on this bill.
Thank you. Question 3, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, how many police officers have been tested for COVID-19?
Cabinet Secretary.
Information received from Police Scotland would confirm that as of the 8th of June, 914 police officers and staff have been tested for COVID-19. I would advise the member that Police Scotland publish data on tests arranged, and that information is published on a weekly basis. And the testing of police officers and staff is important. It will continue as long as is necessary. Our police officers are on the front line each day, and I would want to thank them from my behalf for the work they do in keeping us safe. And as the Minister for Community Safety has already said, there is no barrier to accessing testing for police officers or staff.
Liam Kerr.
Yeah, thank Cabinet Secretary for that answer. But look, there are over 17,000 officers and 5,000 staff in Scotland. But the data that the Cabinet Secretary refers to suggests that there were fewer than 300 tests arranged in the whole of May. Now, the SPF warned asymptomatic testing was not being offered, and it seems that they were right. But the SPF has also asked why Crown Office guidance allows those arrested for coughing or spitting on officers to be released from custody before trial. Does the Cabinet Secretary know that?
Cabinet Secretary.
So there's two parts to this question. In relation to testing, I repeat what confirmation the Minister for Community Safety gave, which was that even if officers are asymptomatic, but they've been involved in a suspected COVID positive incident, then they can get testing. Let there be no equivocation on that point. On the second point that Liam Kerr raises, of course, I will always listen carefully to what the Police Federation have to say. It matters for who is in custody, who is retained in remand, are not decisions that are made by ministers. They are independent of ministers. What I'd also say is that if somebody has been accused of and has a pattern of behaviour of assaulting police officers, I'm not entirely convinced keeping them in a custody cell, in a police custody cell where they are surrounded by other police officers, is necessarily the best course of action. But I will listen carefully to what the Police Federation and others have to say on this matter.
Question 4, Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is being provided to victims of domestic abuse during the COVID-19 outbreak.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first and foremost, it's completely unacceptable that people may be experiencing abuse in their own homes. Let me be clear, if you are experiencing domestic abuse, help is available. We've given over 1.5 million to Scottish Women's Aid to assist to Rape Crisis Scotland, to support rapid service redesign, expand capacity and cover the cost of infrastructure. Just to end for brevity, Presiding Officer, I'm speaking to the Chief Constable almost daily. I'm also speaking to local authority partners on a regular basis on this issue. And of course, we continue to listen to survivors of domestic abuse and what more we can do to assist them during lockdown.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary. For that reply, and every piece of support is very welcome. I would like to highlight a new service which has been offered by Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis, which is during the current lockdown, establishment of a text line service for survivors who are finding it extremely difficult to find a private place or a space to seek support. Can I therefore ask if the Cabinet Secretary would commit to providing support to ensure this service can be open to other organisations who offer assistance to survivors of sexual violence and abuse, and that support continues post-lockdown?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, in the interest of brevity, can I thank Sandra White for raising a really important service. Yes, I commit to looking with an absolute open mind, not just at the service that Sandra White mentions, but can we potentially look at giving similar support to other organisations. And she makes a very, very good point that this is not just about supporting survivors of domestic abuse during lockdown. If we can support them further when it comes to the transition out of lockdown, or indeed when we're in the recovery phase, then that is something that this government takes exceptionally seriously.
Brief supplementary from Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Scottish Women's Aid have warned that increased requests for emergency accommodations coincided with a reduction in their capacity due to distancing requirements and delays in being able to move individuals to more permanent homes. Does the Cabinet Secretary believe there's enough refuge capacity in Scotland, and is he aware of recommendations from the Home Affairs Committee that space in hostels and hotels be secured so that a safe space can be guaranteed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Liam MacArthur raises an exceptionally important point. It is a point that's been raised to me before by Scottish Women's Aid and indeed others. My colleague Christina McKelvey and I are in discussions, and I should say Kevin Stewart, the Housing Minister, are in discussions with those organisations to see what further support we can provide. I haven't seen the report from the Home Affairs Committee, but on the back of Liam MacArthur's question, I'll make sure I have access to it. We can learn from other jurisdictions. I'm always open to doing that.
Question 5, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government for what reason prisoners are not routinely tested for COVID-19 before release.
Cabinet Secretary.
Operational measures taken by prison and health staff in Scotland have been effective in reducing the spread of COVID-19 right across the prison estate. As of the week ending the 5th of June, there was no confirmed positive cases of COVID-19 in Scottish prisons and just 7 individuals self-isolating across 5 establishments. This is a significant achievement by SPS and NHS staff. As in the wider community, prisoners displaying symptoms of COVID-19 can be tested to know whether or not they have the virus. Relevant healthcare arrangements will be put in place as appropriate for those prisoners who have then reached liberation date. Under the recent coronavirus early release scheme, if a healthcare professional considered that a prisoner had or was likely to have coronavirus, that individual would not have been authorised for immediate early release. In practice, there was no cases where this was necessary. Testing people who are asymptomatic only provides a point-in-time assessment of whether there is evidence of virus in their sample. Prison and NHS staff will continue to keep the position on testing under review in light of relevant health protection advice.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his comprehensive response? I hear all that he has to say. However, a prisoner being released is moving from one residential setting into another. And given that we now know the importance of testing as a means of trying to trace the incidence of coronavirus, I wonder, would you not agree with me that it would be prudent to test prisoners at the opportunity where they are leaving prison and going into the wider population, simply as a precautionary measure?
Cabinet Secretary, and I'll have to be brief, please.
I'll certainly reflect on what Murdo Fraser says. Every prisoner that is released is given adequate healthcare advice. Bear in mind, of course, if a prisoner was tested, they're due for liberation, but they were found to be positive, it is not clear that legally they can be held back from being liberated. So what is important here is that we ensure that there's appropriate healthcare protection advice. But of course, I'll continue to keep the situation under review.
I have 5 minutes and 3 questions. You can just do them briefly and get through them. Number 6, Jamie Halker-Johnson, please.
To ask the Scottish Government what conditions are placed on the use of mobile phones that have been allocated to prisoners during the COVID-19 outbreak.
Cabinet Secretary.
There's a number of restrictions that are placed and security controls that are placed. They're similar to the existing prison telephone system. The receiving party will be notified that the call originates from a prison. The mobile phone will only be able to call the phone numbers that are on their approved call list. In addition, those in custody will be able to contact the Samaritans at any time from the mobile phones. Calls can only be made from the mobile phones, not received. All calls will be recorded. It's not possible to access the internet or to send or receive text messages. In addition, there will be security seals fitted to each battery. If these are damaged, then the phone will be removed.
Jamie Halker-Johnson.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and I fully appreciate the need for prisoners and their families to be able to continue to communicate at a time when visiting is not possible because of the pandemic. But can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to be clear that he believes that there are no reasonable opportunities available for these mobile phones to be misused, and that the technology to monitor the calls is fully in place? And has he been made aware of any incidents where that may have occurred? And can he further confirm whether the Scottish Government plans to withdraw these mobile phones from prisoners after the end of the COVID-19 outbreak?
I did ask for brevity, Mr Halker-Johnson. Cabinet Secretary.
So in brief, the mobile phones are not rolled out yet. All these security provisions are exactly why we're taking our necessary time to roll out the mobile phones. As the current phone system is not entirely, absolutely 100% risk-free, I could not sit here and give Jamie Halker-Johnson an absolute assurance that there will be no issues whatsoever. But what I can give him an assurance is that, of course, where these issues are identified, they will be dealt with quickly, swiftly, and effectively.
Question 7, Emma Harper.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the process through which people with complex medical conditions are treated when they're taken into police or prison custody.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, our frontline police and prison officers, together, of course, with our NHS staff, work hard every day to support people in custody, many of whom have complex healthcare needs. And everybody is screened on admission to custody to identify if they have any immediate healthcare needs. While the admission process is slightly different for police and prison custody, if an individual with complex medical conditions requires medical attention, in either setting they'll be attended to by NHS healthcare professionals. Where a need is identified, a patient will be referred to an appropriate healthcare setting or clinical speciality in line with clinically led protocols. In both settings, the responsibility for healthcare services sit with the Integrated Joint Board and indeed with NHS boards.
Emma Harper.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. I have had a few cases where persons with complex medical issues have had some challenges obtaining their medication. I would be interested if the Cabinet Secretary would commit to working with me so that I can help provide further detail so that we can help people have a health approach when they might find themselves in police or prison custody.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I'd be happy to meet with Emma Harper to discuss the issue in more detail.
Question 8, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of recent international events, what data it keeps on the injuries incurred by BAME people in police custody.
Cabinet Secretary.
Okay, I thank Daniel Johnson for raising an important issue. The Scottish Government itself does not collect or hold any data regarding injuries incurred by BAME people in police custody in Scotland. Data collection regarding people injured while in police custody is an operational matter for the Chief Constable. However, I can confirm that Police Scotland have indicated that their national custody system does record the ethnicity and details of any injuries of those presented at a police custody centre. Injuries are referred to and assessed by NHS staff, either on site or indeed a local hospital, and a suitable care plan is put in place. Daniel Johnson will know that the functions of the SPA include maintaining the Police Service of Scotland, promoting and supporting continuous improvement, and keeping the policing of Scotland under review, and holding the Chief Constable to account. In that vein, I'll therefore raise this issue with David Crichton and indeed the Chief Constable during our next trilateral discussion. And I would say to Daniel Johnson, well, there may be challenges in necessarily identifying that data. For example, numerous records may have to be manually sifted. Notwithstanding that, this is an important issue that Daniel Johnson raises, and I'll endeavour to raise it with my colleagues.
Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and clearly in the light of George Floyd's tragic death in the United States, we must redouble our efforts in this regard. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would agree with me that we should have regular reporting of this data. I wonder if he might also elaborate on the answer he gave yesterday in debate around disaggregated data regarding hate crime.
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, in the interest of time, why don't I agree to write to Daniel Johnson in relation to the disaggregated hate crime data? In terms of the first part of his question, I couldn't agree with him more. I think I have to personally, but also as a government, we have to redouble our efforts in these matters. I think there's nothing to be lost from as much transparency in terms of the data as possible. It is not my data, therefore I can't give you an absolute assurance around publication, but I will raise this issue with the Chief Constable and with the SPA. But I think broadly in principle, I support much of what Daniel Johnson says.
Thank you. That concludes questions, portfolio questions on justice law officers. I thank members and I thank the Cabinet Secretary.